Okay, so last time we got the body into paint and it's looking very spiffy, but that is going to have to kind of wait for a little while now for that paint to harden up before we can do anything. We've got the neck hung up there, but we're not going to do anything with that this time, because before we get onto that, I actually want to get the pickguard onto the bench and get the wiring sorted out. So we'll make a start on that and get that little job out of the way. And this should be fairly straightforward. I've already got all of my components onto the pickguard, apart from the capacitor. I say capacitor, not capacitors, because I'm actually going to be doing a one cap setup on this. I've got my instructions from Tomb Raider, fairly straightforward. I've just done a Stratocaster, so this should be hopefully pretty plain sailing. And the first thing I want to do is, I did this on the last job, is I just want to kind of tidy up all of these pickup wires the best I can. And I'm just going to do that by using some little bits of heat shrink. I'm not actually going to shrink them, but I can use those to just really make everything nice and neat. And I'm just going to put a bit of blue tape around there, just so I know that this one is from the neck pickup. Now all those grounds are going to go onto the volume pot, so that will keep those nicely together, and the 3 hot wires from the pickups will go over to the switch like that. Nice and neat, just as we like it. And I'm going to do all the wiring on this with these cloth covered wires. I really like the look of those, and I like the way that you can get a nice neat join on them just by kind of pushing back the shielding, soldering it in, and then pulling that shielding back in position. Just gives it a nice neat look. So all of these wires are actually pre-tinned, so I don't need to be doing any tinning work on those. But I think to start with, we'll get the soldering iron switched on. Break out some solder. And we can just start tinning these terminals on the switch. That I'm going to apply the wires from the pickups to. And according to my drawing, the pickups go to these 3, and then this 4th one is joined onto the other side of the switch, but I'll do that in a little while. And as we saw, that's the one from the neck pickup, and that's going to this furthest one here. I'm going to try and keep these quite long so we can keep them pushed down and out of the way. somewhere I have a pair of small snips. I don't know where that somewhere is though, so I have to try and do it best I can with these big ones. Okay, with that done, we can then start to add in some of the other stuff that we need to wire up. And I'll start by just finishing off on this side of the switch. By just adding in a wire. And we can just bridge across to the other side of the switch. Just getting that through there, like that. And while I'm at it, I'll just put another bit of wire through. It'll go out to lug 1 of the volume pot. Like that. And then there's a couple more bits we need to do on this volume pot. First one is that lug 3. We need to just bend back against the pot body. Try and get them as close as you can. And solder that in place. And I'm also going to start putting a blob of solder down there. For all our ground wires. And then I'm going to take a nice long piece of wire. That will eventually become the hot to the output. And then just solder that onto the last of the lugs on the volume pot. And perhaps now you can see why I like using this cloth covered wire so much. It just makes everything look so nice and neat. Okay, so next up I want to get all of these grounds attached onto the volume pot. Now there's going to be 5 in total, and I think putting 5 onto the same spot is going to make things look a little bit messy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 3 from the pickups up to this side here, and then the 2 additional grounds that I need, one for the claw and one for the output, I will put on just above where we've soldered that lug onto, and I think that'll look a lot neater. Get a little bit of solder onto that pot body. And we can get these trimmed down to a more suitable length and do exactly the same with them. Now next up I need to put some grounds that link all of the pots together. And on the drawing this is shown as kind of normal black wires. But I prefer to use this bus wire because it just keeps things nice and neat. So all I'll do is I'll just solder a little length of this on across the 3 pots like that. And to do that I think I'm probably going to be best to get this into the vise so it's all nice and steady for me, and it actually works better for me this way, just a lot easier to get to. Which only really leaves us now the tone pots to sort out. Fairly straightforward. We have one wire that's going to go from the switch to the central lug of this tone pot, and then another wire that's going to go from the other lug of the switch to lug 1 of this tone pot, and then our capacitor will go through lug 3 of that tone pot and lug 2 of this one, and then ground onto the body of the pot. But before I do that, we'll just get some wires prepared and run from the switch. Okay, so that's all wired up now. I've just kind of temporarily put the output jack on. Now, I've worried myself to death, and I always bloody do this, is I plug it in to test it and there's a horrible buzzing. And every time it's because my soldering iron's switched on. As soon as I turn it off, the buzzing pretty much goes away. So note to self, remember to turn that off. And we seem to be everything seems to be working absolutely fine as we want it to. So happy days, that's the wiring successfully done. And apart from kind of these wires that are coming off to the output and everything else, I think that looks nice and neat. So very happy with that too. And that should just slot straight into the body very, very nicely now. I will check it just to make sure there's nothing fouling the routes, but I'm pretty sure we should be absolutely spot on with that. So that's another bit done and out the way, which kind of clears the way for a bit of work on getting the neck finished. However, I want to throw this one out to you guys a little bit because I'm not entirely sure what I want to do with it. I'll get some of this out of the way and we'll have a look and I'll explain what I mean. Because obviously this guitar is going to be relicked to a certain extent, but I'm unsure where I want to go with the neck, because for a guitar with kind of a light relicking, which is what I intend to do, if I had a maple fretboard, I would put some wear marks onto the maple board and pretty much leave it at that, because that's where you'd start to wear the lacquer. You wouldn't really burn through the lacquer on the back of the neck too much. However, on a kind of heavily relicked neck, what you tend to see is there's a bit of lacquer on the headstock, there's a bit of lacquer on the heel, but the rest of it has kind of been worn through. And I don't know where to go with this, so perhaps you would like to leave a comment as to what you would like to see. Obviously, the owner of the guitar is probably going to have a bit of input into this as well. I think we've got three choices here. We can either just do a fully lacquered neck that's got quite a flat lacquer finish on it to replicate a guitar that's kind of had a lot of use but hasn't yet burnt through the lacquer. We could have the really heavily used neck that just has the lacquer on the headstock and the heel and a kind of bare wood main part. I didn't want to use the word shaft, but I'll use it, shaft of the neck. Or we could do a kind of halfway house where we'd have some significant wear at the top end of the neck where the bulk of the playing would be, but then lacquer at the other end and on the headstock. Obviously, the front of the headstock wouldn't really get much wear. You occasionally see them with a cigarette burn there, but apart from that, they're usually pretty good. So like I say, drop a comment below and just kind of give me your thoughts on what you'd like to see on the back of this neck. And then in the next episode, we can set about putting that into practice. But I'm going to leave this one here. I think we've covered more than enough one episode. So I'll be back in a few days' time when we crack on with that neck. Until then, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.